Okay, so welcome everybody to another Tuesday live training. Uh, here at OneSource. So, where every single Tuesday, what we do is, we try to introduce one or two new personal development tools that you can use to work with your clients and to work on yourself. So, what are we going to do today? Primarily, what I want to get into is breaking bad habits. You know, primarily, if you think about it, everything we do here is either one or two things. We're either breaking bad habits, people have negative habits they're trying to eliminate, or we're helping individuals to build positive, strong, good habits. That's all primarily we do here. That's all our system really is. So what we want to do is, we want to take a little deeper look today. We want to take a deeper look and see exactly how we can do that, how we can help our clients to eliminate some of those negative habits that they've created. So we're going to start off with a TED Talk here, and it's actually one of my favorites. It's actually not a TED Talk. It's a talk by Mel Robbins about procrastination, but it's definitely a good one. So I think you're going to enjoy it anyway. So it's very short, about 3 minutes, I think. So we'll have a listen, and then we'll have a little chat about it.
You're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. Big difference. Because if it's a habit, I can teach you to use science to break it. So let's talk a little bit about procrastination. Who in here struggles with procrastination? Yeah, and the rest of you that aren't raising your hand are just procrastinating on doing it, aren't you? I know. You see, I always thought procrastination had to do with the thing I was procrastinating around, right? Like that procrastination has something to do with work. Believe it or not, procrastination has nothing to do with your work. Procrastination is a form of stress relief. Let me explain this. So let's say that you've got some stuff going on in your life, and heck, who doesn't have stuff going on in your life? Maybe you're fighting with your significant other. Maybe mom's or dad's health is failing, and it's really, really upsetting you. Maybe you've got some financial stuff. You put too much of your savings into Bitcoin, and now that that's crashed, you're stressed out about it, right? And so you go into work, and when you get into work, you got stuff to do. You kind of walk in, and you got this big stress ball that subconsciously is hanging over your head. And so you walk in, and you sit down, and you know you got 13 phone calls you need to make. And you also know that you've been chickening out, you've been making easy calls, and there's a bunch of CIOs or other people that are higher level that you haven't been calling. And so as you sit down to do it, you got the stress on your shoulders, your brain it starts to go, wait a minute, well, you want me to make a call to somebody that I'm scared to make? Absolutely not. I'm so stressed out about, can we just watch some cat videos for a minute? And next thing you know, an hour's gone by. And then, of course, what do? You beat yourself up. So the only way that you can break this habit, and that's an important word for you to hear, you're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. Big difference. Because if it's a habit, I can teach you to use science to break it. You see, all habits have three parts. There's a trigger, and in the case of procrastination, the trigger is always stress. Then there's a pattern you repeat, and in the case of procrastination, it is to avoid doing something. And then there's a reward. You get a little stress relief. The only way to break a habit, you guys, is not to deal with the triggers. You're never going to get rid of the stress in your life. But you can 100% change your pattern of avoiding work. So next time that you're in a situation where you feel yourself hesitate, you spent way too much time checking out the highlights from last night's scores, what you're going to do is you're going to go, oh, I must be stressed out about something. Acknowledge the stress. Then go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I want you to count to yourself because I want you to interrupt the habit that's stored here, and I want you to awaken your prefrontal cortex. Then I want you to just work. Just for 5 minutes. The reason why I want you to only work for 5 minutes is because your problem isn't working. It's the habit of avoiding. I just need you to start. And here's the other cool thing. We know based on research that if we can get you to start, 80% of you are going to keep going.
So now you probably have a better understanding of why I really enjoy Mel Robbins. She puts things so simplistically, but it's a nice way to put it, actually, what she said. You're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. So I really enjoy that. I don't know why. I just think it's a nice way of putting it, but it kind of summarizes, well, any negative bad habit. Um, you just have a habit of avoiding things. You have a habit of um, not cleaning your room, or overeating, or um, primarily any negative, smoking cigarettes to deal with stress. Whatever the case, consuming too much alcohol. It's just all bad habits. Now, please note, I'm not making light of if you have any serious addictions, but all they are is very seriously bad habits. So, when you look at the four stages of a habit, and this has the same to do with whether you're creating a positive habit or a negative habit, they're both the same. Primarily, the only difference is one is helping you and one is hurting you. But they all start with a clue. A clue is the trigger. Then you have the craving. Well, the craving is primarily your state, your emotional state that you go into when when you hit that trigger in certain situations. Then the response. Well, the response is the action that you take, the pattern that you normally go through, and the reward. Well, what you get for obviously doing it. In most cases, it's some form of a stress relief. Um, Another way to look at it is the habit loop. We would have studied this when we were looking at Tiny Habits, the book by B.J. Fogg, Tiny Habits. Really powerful book. But the habit loop is pretty much what we do within our system. Reminder, routine, reward. Reminder, routine, reward. Think about it. How does our system work? Well, you have a reminder. We have our four key areas, and we look at it and we're very aware of the actions we're supposed to take on a consistent basis. That's the reminder. Okay? We have our system. Our system itself is the reminder. The routine, well, those would be the various actions that we take within those key areas. For an example, under the area of myself, for health and fitness, well, I make sure that I get enough sleep. I make sure that I get enough hydration, drink enough water primarily. I make sure that I stick to certain foods and I count my calories and eliminate certain negative um, things from my diet. And I get enough exercise. Those are the routines. The rewards, well, the rewards are obviously looking better, feeling better, higher energies, more longevity. But again, it's our system. The reminder system itself, the routine is the action, and the rewards, if you really think about it, well, that's the points. You can use the points as a reward system, a positive reinforcement, but it's a consistent, it's all about that conditioning. We talk about neuroassociative conditioning, the science of neuroassociative conditioning. Well, primarily, all that is doing the same thing over and over and over again in a certain way. You're conditioning yourself for success. That's exactly what the habit loop is. And if you'll notice as well, Mel Robbins, she talked about how primarily she can use science to help you break a bad habit. The science she's talking about is a neuroscience. Exactly. neuroassociative conditioning. So, one of the key things we have to make sure that we're always very, very aware of is our triggers. If you ever want to be able to eliminate some negative behavior, you have to start with the trigger. So, but again, try to become very aware. And that's a big thing about what we do here, the whole awareness side of things. Become very aware of those emotional triggers, because if you want to eliminate those habits, start with the triggers. Also, your patterns. The patterns are the emotional states that you put yourself into once you hit those triggers. Again, Tony Robbins often talks about it. Self-awareness is one of the rarest of human commodities. I don't mean self-consciousness where you're limiting and evaluating yourself. I mean being aware of your own patterns, the emotional states, the things that you're doing once you start, getting hit by those triggers. Those they put things in motion, the patterns that you're running. So also to the rewards, because again, Mel Robbins even talks about that. There's always some type of reward that you're giving yourself when you procrastinate or do any bad habit. And oftentimes, we got to be very aware that we're not linking up too much pleasure, to that activity. That's the reward. But the majority of time, it's stress relief. It's a form of stress relief that we're giving ourselves, whether it be smoking that cigarette, looking at our phone, overeating, consuming alcohol, whatever the case may be. We all have our things that we do. But again, it's usually because of some type of stress relief that we're looking for. So the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule is, I think it's a very powerful tool. It's one that I've been using a lot lately. I'm really trying to eliminate how often I look at my phone. I have a bad habit, and I'm trying to eliminate or at least reduce it, of consistently always having my phone, always checking my messages at inappropriate times. So I've started really trying to get good at implementing the 10-minute rule. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little clip for you here, because I don't think we've ever gone through the 10-minute rule before. And again, this will be another good strategy, a good technique that you can incorporate into your little batch of personal development tools. So when you're working with a client, you have something, that you can, pull out and you can use and suggest, provide some type of solution for whatever challenge that they're facing. So here we go.
When most people think about distraction, they think about all the pings and dings that come from their cell phones or their computers. But it turns out that studies find that only 10% of the time that you check your phone because of some ping, ding, or ring. So what's the other 90%? Studies find the other 90% of the time that we check our devices, we're not checking them because of external triggers, things outside of us, but rather because of internal triggers, something that's going on inside of us. What are these internal triggers? Internal triggers are uncomfortable emotional states that we seek to escape from. And it is the cause of nearly all of our behavior, this desire to escape discomfort. For example, when you're feeling lonely, check Facebook. When you're uncertain, Google it. When you're bored, lots of solutions to boredom. We can check stock prices and sports scores. The news. Let's tune into what's happening with someone halfway across the world so we don't have to think about what we're feeling right now here at home. So what we have to do if we are about to become indistractable is learn to master these internal triggers. That overwhelmingly distraction begins from within. So let me give you one quick tip that you can use right now to help you start mastering these internal triggers. This is called the 10-minute rule. When you experience that urge that might lead you to do something you'll later regret, what I want you to do is to not tell yourself no. Okay, this is a very important lesson. We know that abstinence, that telling yourself a strict no, don't do it, actually makes you want things more. It's like pulling on a rubber band. If you pull on a rubber band, it goes tighter, 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 tighter until you can't pull it anymore. And then when you finally let go, it doesn't go back to where it started. No, it ricochets across the room. The relief of giving in to whatever it is you're trying to not do is registered in the brain as a reward. We see this with smoking. We see this with obsessive device checking. All kinds of behaviors. Telling yourself a strict no is not actually always useful. A much healthier technique is to not tell yourself no, but to say not yet. Specifically telling yourself that you can give in to any distraction you please, but in 10 minutes. So let me bring this close to home. I've written 2 bestsellers. I've written thousands of articles that have been published in the Harvard Business Review, the New York Times, and let me tell you, writing has never come easy for me. It is a slog. And all I want to do while I'm writing is go Google something or check email or scroll a social media feed because it's very uncomfortable. It's boring. It's stressful. It's hard work. And so I'm full of these internal triggers that I just want to escape. But I know I need to get my work done. So here's what I'll do. I'll set a timer for 10 minutes. I'll put my phone down, and now I have a choice to make. I can either get back to the task at hand, get back to the writing, or do what psychologists call surf the urge. Surfing the urge acknowledges that these internal triggers, these uncomfortable emotional states, they're like waves. They crest and then they subside. And if we can ride out those waves, those cravings, like a surfer on a surfboard, this is one way that we can master those internal triggers so they don't become our master. So many times I'll just sit there for 10 minutes and I'll try and talk to myself like a good friend. What is it that I'm experiencing right now? Where are these internal triggers coming from? Oh, it's because I really want this article to be great. I really want to do good work. So this is a good thing that I'm feeling this way. And I teach you how to do this self-talk in the course and in my book about how to talk to yourself like a good friend so that you can ride out that urge like a surfer on a surfboard. And here's where the miracle happens. If you wait out just those 10 minutes, you'll find that 9 times out of 10, by the time that timer goes off, you won't even have that urge anymore. And if you still do, it's okay. Give into it. Because over time, what you're going to do is make the 10-minute rule into an 11-minute rule, and then maybe a 15-minute rule, and then a 20-minute rule. And by doing this, you're going to build up your ability to fight distraction and master those internal triggers so that you can become indistracted.
Okay, yeah, that like I said, that's one that I've really started incorporating the last probably 30 days or so. Um, the 10-minute rule is good. It's very good. Depending on what you're trying to use it for, obviously. But again, what did he talk about there? Well, he talked about triggers, one, but a different type of trigger. Primarily, he talked about an internal trigger, which I think is very good. Because again, triggers often, when we think about triggers, we're thinking about something in the outside, a person, a maybe some event that we're going to, maybe something that we're doing, maybe driving a car or whatever the case may be. But a lot of times, it's just those triggers that go on in our own head that kind of set us off. And again, it's always generally, I find, has to do with stress. So when he talks about the internal triggers, again, I've got a bad habit that I'm trying to eliminate. I'm sure you have your habits as well. We all have them. But something I'm trying to really work on is how often I check my phone. Way too often do I check my phone. And again, something happens inside where I feel stress or something like that, some internal trigger, and I'll reach for my phone. And it's just a distraction. I know it. It's just a way that, I should check my email, or I should check my WhatsApp, or I should check my messages, or did I miss a call, or whatever the case may be. But again, I know it's just some form of an internal trigger, something setting me off, and that's primarily my pattern. Well, how I deal with it is I reach for my phone. So what I'm trying to do now is I don't just say no. He's dead right about that. If you just say no, that's just trying to get by on pure willpower. And that generally doesn't work. If anything, it just makes it reinforces the desire more. But the phrase "not yet" is very strong because you're not telling yourself no. You're just saying not yet. 10 minutes. Now, I don't set a timer, but what I will do is I generally will take a quick look at the my watch or the time on my laptop or whatever the case may be, and just gauge it to the best of your ability. 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, if like he talks about surfing the urge, riding it out, you're not telling yourself no. You're just kind of riding it out. You're surfing that urge. And if it's still there after the 10 minutes, go ahead, do it. But he's right about one thing, and Mel Robbins talks about it as well. She said 5 minutes, if you remember what she talked about in hers. Usually it's gone. After 5-10 minutes, that you've surfed it out, and primarily that urge doesn't exist anymore. So you just continue with working or whatever it is that you're doing. So, but if it's still there, go ahead, reward yourself and do it. It's not a big thing, but it's a good habit to get into. And I liked what he said there too about you start off with 10 minutes, then move up to 11 minutes. And what you're going to do is you're just going to increase it 5 minutes. Like Mel Robbins says, 5 minutes, whatever you decide. But start out and increase it and build upon it. Just like we do with our system, just like so many times with our actions, we start out where we are. We start out with something small, and over a period of time, well, we increase the weights, we make it harder, we build that muscle, and we make it more challenging to go ahead and achieve the result we're looking for. We push ourselves a little bit harder, but it gets easier as we do it. This is the same concept. But I really do like that. It's one that I've been using a lot. I strongly suggest that you try it yourself. And again, you always want to try these things yourself so you can feel confident when recommending them to a client. When I'm talking to you and I'm telling you about these things, I've done these things. I'm not a big guy on recommending things that it can't always be the case, but I generally, anything I recommend, I've tried to some level of success. I might not have succeeded as much as I would have liked to, but I've tried it and I've noted the positives to it. You should make sure you do the same. But try them out firsthand, put you in a much stronger position when you're dealing with clients. And and we're going to go through these very quick because I know you guys know these, but I just want to make sure you're using them because too often I think we kind of learn things and then we just move on to the next thing and we're not really using the strategies and the techniques that we have. But again, Mel Robbins talks about it, the science. She can help change those bad habits with the science. What that gentleman was just talking about. That's all, it's very similar. It's all neuroscience, primarily when he talks about surfing the urge and the internal triggers. But again, all of these things can be, well, handled, dealt with through neurosociative conditioning. And just to remind you of the 6 steps, and we're not going to go through them too much, but just a quick reminder. Remember the first step. Decide what you really want. And decide, or become aware of what's preventing you from having it. Get leverage on yourself. Focus on the pain, not taking action, and the pleasure of taking the action right now. So in other words, what are you doing? You're using pain and pleasure instead of having pain and pleasure use you. Interrupt those limiting patterns, beliefs, and habits. And again, if you remember when we went through the training on this, what did we recommend that you do? A good one, a very strong one to use. Well, it's always 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the 5-second rule from Mel Robbins. Create pattern and beliefs and habits design powerful replacements. Again, we talked about, well, the power of replacements being good, positive questions. Questions that you can use to go ahead and control and direct the focus of your brain, of where your attention is going to. And then condition your patterns. Condition a new pattern with rewards and punishments until it becomes consistent. Again, neurosociative conditioning, repetition over and over and over again. The rewards and punishments, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but the one that we recommend, well, the most obvious one is always those point systems, the point system in the dashboard. And then test it. Well, testing it, that's just more or less making a determination of the system that you've just created, whatever you're using it for. Is it meeting any of those 6 basic human needs? Is it, making you certain? Is it making you fulfilling your need for uncertainty, or for growth, or for significance? All of the different needs that we all have, it has to be fulfilling some way, shape, or form, some one of those needs. Hopefully 2 or 3, if not all 6 of them. So, Tiny Habits. Again, this is a book that I highly, highly recommend. I strongly suggest you get either the audio book. It is actually, you can find it if you don't want to invest in it. I know that there's tons and stuff out there on it on YouTube, so you can go ahead and get a pretty good indication. But I think it's one that you should have in your collection anyway. BJ Fogg, he's a behavior scientist for Stanford University, really knows his stuff. But again, everything that he's talking about, you can go ahead and you can see how it's incorporated in our system, or some form of neurosociative conditioning as well. So I'm just going to play a quick clip of his. It's just an interview that he actually did. But he talks about not so much creating habit, but breaking bad habits.
How do we make a bad habit harder to do, or how do we change a bad habit? I mean, habits are sort of neutral, right? They're neither good nor bad. How do we stop a habit that we feel is bad for us?
Yeah, the valence of that word has shifted over the last 10 years. And yes, you're right. Habits are habits. The way they form, good habits, what we call good habits and bad habits, they all form in the same way. Our brain, the way that brain gets rewired, it's not like, here are the good habits and bad habits. It's behaviors become automatic, and then it's ourselves or the culture that labels them good or bad. Creating habits is pretty straightforward and easy, and that's what the Tiny Habits method is all about. It's for creating habits, stopping unwanted behaviors, or what people call breaking bad habits. It can be much, much harder, and it's not the same thing. And they're as different as growing this little tree, let's say a palm tree with coconuts, to pulling it out of the earth. They're different processes. And unfortunately, there's a lot of information out there that tells people how to break habits that is not effective enough. It's limited. And in response to that, I've created a 3-phase, I call it master plan for behavior change. That's exactly for very, very wired in habits that people want to get rid of. Some habits are really easy to stop. For instance, we're not talking about those. Like stop the habit of going to the gym, stop the habit of paying your bills. Those are easy to stop. But it's these kind of habits, it's not as simple as many people have said, and that really upsets me. Some people have trivialized how hard some of these habits are to stop. And the problem with that is that when people read that and then they can't stop drinking or smoking or playing games on the internet or gambling, then they blame themselves and they beat themselves up and they think, oh, I'm flawed, I'm terrible, I'm awful. And so people who mislead others about how to get rid of unwanted behaviors are actually damaging lots of people, and that makes me grumpy. So in response to that, I said, no, here's the system. There's 3 phases to it. I'll just go through pretty quickly, Shane. First of all, think of it as untangling. The phase 1 is you practice creating good habits. So you set the bad habit aside and say, I'm just going to create a bunch of good habits. And in the process of creating good habits, your identity will shift, and that may push out some of the unwanted habits. You'll develop the skills of behavior change. Behavior change is a skill, and you'll use those skills later. And then you'll also develop more motivation. Why? Because your fear of change will be reduced. So that's why in phase 1, you focus on creating good habits. Phase 2, then you look at the habit you want to stop and you untangle it. For each one of these phases, there's a flow chart in the back of my book, Tiny Habits. So, I mean, of course, I think of everything in terms of systems and flows, and it's a comprehensive system. And in phase 2, you identify which part of the tangle you want to undo, and you see if you can remove the prompt. And if that doesn't work, then you see if you can make it harder to do. In other words, manipulatability. And if you can't do that, then you see if you can change the level of motivation. So you're using the components of the behavior model systematically: prompt, ability, motivation, in that order. Step by step, if one works, you're done. And you can go to another tangle in the habit. If it doesn't work, you go to the next step. So it's a system. If you find you cannot just simply stop the habit, then you go to phase 3, which is about swapping it. Okay, so many people say you must swap it. That's not true. In this comprehensive system, that is the last phase. So instead of coming home from work and getting on, I'll say YouTube, one of my friends has a YouTube addiction, what will I do instead? So then that person would look for a swap, which is at once you're stopping a habit and then creating a new one. And there's a systematic way for doing it. It builds on prompts, ability, motivation, just like all the rest of the behavior design system. And so what you look for is something to swap in that will be more motivating or easier to do, or both, than the existing habit you want to untangle. So that's a high-level summary. Focus on creating new habits, then see if you can stop the habit, and then if neither of those work, go to phase 3, and then you focus on swapping, but you don't have to guess. There's a system for that I've mapped out, and it comes back to the order of what you do and how you pick which behaviors, and everything in behavior. Everything comes back to prompt, ability, and motivation. Those are the components you have to fiddle with to either create a behavior or get rid of one.
Okay, so BJ Fogg, interesting guy, actually knows his stuff really, really well. He makes a really good point there, and there's a reason I wanted to play this clip, and I want to make sure that everybody is very aware of it. When dealing with serious addiction problems or serious bad habits, compulsions of some type, either gambling, smoking, whatever the case may be, drugs, alcohol, one thing we want to be careful of is that we don't want to be giving out bad advice um, to the prospects, to the clients, to the individuals that we're working with. Yes, we want to provide them with some tools that they can use. We want to go ahead and we want to support them. But one thing we don't want to do is have them come out worse, primarily because now they're blaming themselves. Because not all habits are that easy to go ahead and shift. They can all be changed and they can all be eliminated, but some are much more challenging. So you have to be aware of this. You do not want to, I would never encourage you, if somebody has a serious addiction problem, I would work with them. I would encourage them to get involved with some, organization that can go ahead and really support them and give them the resources that they need. I would be there for them to the best of my ability and encourage them. But you never want to trivialize it where it's all you have to do is just link up a bunch of pain to it, or something like that. Because again, we never want to create a situation where some of these individuals are now, they tried it, they couldn't do it, and now they just, they feel like a failure. That's not gonna be positive for anybody. So, but if you notice some of the things that he said there, what we do in our system, the very first one in his master plan, practice creating good habits. That's what we're doing all the time. There's a real positive to creating good habits for yourself. Yes, you get the benefit. Yes, you get the results, but you also get the skills. You also get the belief. You also get to reinforce a stronger self-image that you're the type of individual that can get it done. You're the type of individual that primarily can go ahead and set their mind to something. They can work at it and they can do it. And that gets easier. Um, so again, that's one of the things we're doing that really stood out. He said, the very first one is master plan, is that how you can eliminate some of these negative behaviors, these hard to solve or eliminate bad habits. Get in the habit of practicing, creating good habits. And that's something we're doing all the time on a daily, consistent basis. Um, look at the habit. Number two, look at the habit, break it down, basically, remove the prompts. That all comes from awareness. Again, that's because you're focused each and every day. You're looking at the things you're doing, you're paying attention, you're becoming very aware. That's one of the powers of the dashboard. I can always notice when I'm reviewing a client's, working with them and I'm having my one-to-ones, you can identify patterns very clearly. If they're having issues, maybe with their weight on the weekend, well, primarily it's the weekend. What changes can we? You can't remove it, but can you make some changes? Or if they're having a relationship problem on a certain day of the week with a certain person, well, you can quickly identify that. You can try to remove the prompt. The prompt might be some activity that they're doing together. That whenever they get together and they go visit this person, or they go to this club or this bar or this whatever, restaurant or the cinema, whatever the case it is. Well, that very well could be the prompt. But again, because we're so aware working with the clients and tracking everything, it can be a very powerful resource. And if you can't change it, can you swap it? Can you swap the prompt? Can you swap the behavior that you're actually doing? But BJ Fogg is really good. I really encourage you to listen to some of his stuff. I get mixed reviews on people as far as do they have the ability to connect with them. I personally I like him, but not even his demeanor, not even the way he presents. I like basically what the meaning of what he says and the systematic approach that he takes to everything. Like this here is the Fogg behavioral model, and it's actually very accurate. There's primarily three things. You have, the motivation, the ability, and the prompts. That's what's going to determine somebody's behavior to a situation. Again, motivation, ability, and prompt. So if you want to change the behavior, well, you're going to have to change one of those things. You have to reduce the motivation to do something. You can get leverage on yourself. Remember neuroassociative conditioning? All about that leverage linking pain and pleasure. Well, the ability could be the accessibility. If you're overeating and you always have the wrong foods in your press, well, you make it very available. It's the ability to do it is pretty simple. Or the prompt. The prompt is the trigger. But again, if you can eliminate or reduce or change any of those, you'll ultimately change the behavior. So another way of putting it is behavior is a product of motivation, ability, and trigger. Again, we talk about the triggers, but the trigger is just a prompt. It's just different wordings on it. But again, change any of those three and you'll change the behavior. So we're going to wrap it up there, guys. Again, I do apologize for any technical problems I'm having with the camera and things like that. I do really apologize because I know it's always nice if I have the camera on. So, but it just kind of happened there a little while ago, and I haven't had time to figure out what happened. Again, if anybody's got any suggestions, drop me a note, drop me a message, let me know. But all I did was I updated my Zoom, and since then, it's only with Zoom. The camera doesn't work, so I know it's not my camera. It's the Zoom app. But anyway, other than that, guys, I'm always available, as you know, after these calls. So questions, comments, concerns, anything that we covered, you want to talk about, you want a little extra support, feel free to reach out to me. Always available. Other than that, we'll see you next Tuesday. One final thing, get on Sean's list again, Sean. I hope you don't mind me volunteering you to do that. But get hold of Sean, and Sean will get you added to his morning links that he sends out. So all the best, everybody. Really appreciate everybody being here, and we will see you all next week.